Guys, we are going to go on a wild ride. We are talking The Possessed. And this one is directed by Chris Sun. Now, Chris Sun has previously been responsible for some kind of cult classic hits, including Charlie's Farm and The Boar. He's become quite kind of popular among horror movie fans, not just in Australia, but kind of around the world as well. And this one kind of does star a Australian horror icon in John Jarratt, of course, most notable for his role in Wolf Creek. Now, this is a possession movie, but it's kind of unlike any possession movie that you've seen before. How to describe it? This is like if the Ghostbusters were Exorcists. I can't think of any better description than Ghostbusters meets The Exorcist to describe this movie, because it is absolutely perfect way of describing it. Let's go into a little more detail, but first I'm going to give you a brief plot synopsis. So we have this character called Jacob, played by Jarratt, who is kind of like an everyman. He's kind of like a, Joe Public, blue collar guy, but he had an accident in his past which has given him the strange ability to perform kind of natural exorcisms. He's not a priest, he doesn't kind of like read from the Bible, but he's able to kind of like naturally, I guess you'd call it supernaturally, to bring out demons of those people who are possessed. And he's kind of got a little bit of a business kind of set up for it. And he works with his nephew, essentially clearing possessed people. But he notes at the beginning of the movie, he's seen an increase in the amount of people that he's having to deal with. At the same time, his nephew is dating this particular girl who reveals that she can actually see demons as well, and remembers kind of dealing with them from way back in her past. So these now kind of a group decide they're going to kind of join forces to tackle a variety of exorcisms through the movie, but ultimately culminating in a very powerful entity which has possessed this guy in the house where a previous kind of owner of the house had been performing kind of demonic rituals and things like this, and that's the kind of the where it all leads up to. So what will happen? You'll have to watch the movie to find out. So let's discuss a little bit further what I think works about this movie. So this is like a breath of fresh air, as they say, in this kind of genre. It's such a odd mix. It's a little bit jarring, I won't lie, but you can't help but really revel in the fact that this movie has so much originality mixed in with so much of the kind of what you're expecting from a possession movie. Because the tone of this is unlike any other possession film. So the threat is taken seriously. These demons mean business. They are dangerous and they are, oppressive and violent. But the characters that we have in the movie are just like everyday folk. These aren't your stuffy priests, talking about the kind of like various prayers and stuff. They're just your average day Joe Schmoes, and in actual fact, they don't really know what they're doing, to be honest with you. They're kind of just going with the flow to a certain degree. And as such, although the movie isn't necessarily, I wouldn't call it a comedy, it's very comedic, because these kind of guys are just kind of like blagging their way through this kind of like these demonic exorcisms, just kind of trial by fire really, and kind of just like working it out as they go. And as such, it's got some kind of quite natural kind of sounding incidental kind of dialogue and kind of fun reactions. In actual fact, this is an Australian movie, you can't help but feel in certain times, it almost feels like an episode of Neighbours, which is a popular Australian soap, with just demonic possessions. It's a kind of a bizarre feel to it. So it has this kind of like very weird tone where it's, there is certainly a dark demon force here that we kind of feel is definitely a threat, but it has this lighter tone to it than a lot of, like I say, its contemporaries, which gives it this very kind of unique flavour. Now, it's not like the Leslie Nielsen Repossessed movie, it's not a spoof, but honestly, the Ghostbusters is the best way I can kind of describe it, but just with exorcisms. So the other thing to note here as well that I think makes this a little different from a lot of exorcism movies is we see a lot of practical makeup in regards to the actual demons. So when Jacob, our kind of guy, pulls these demons out, they either kind of manifest physically in front of him, or he kind of like takes them in internally, has to kind of exercise himself. So we see a lot of these kind of like these demons in practical form. As they kind of manifest outside of the exorcism. And they look grotesque and very, very horrifying, I have to say. The effects work here is some practical. The actual creature effects are practical, but we get like the kind of CGI smoke and stuff coming out of people's mouths. But the practical makeup here is a joy to behold, because it's fabulously gory and gooey and pretty gross at times, and we see a variety of different kind of demons that look all type of gross and scary. So I kind of, if you like a kind of creature features and lots of kind of like interesting kind of like makeup effects and kind of creature effects, you'll love it, because it's like there's so much in the way of these interesting kind of style kind of creatures and stuff that you'll kind of see through the movie, and you see, you know, a reasonable amount of them. It's not just limited to one or two. So that I kind of quite enjoyed. And the characters are kind of quite likeable as well, because they just played like, as I say, very much like the Ghostbusters. This team of people just seem like regular folk that you can kind of relate to. And they, you know, we have some kind of dialogue that are outside of the kind of the exorcisms as well, that will just, I think, underscore some of the kind of just the down-to-earth nature of these kind of like these people. Now, this movie arguably, and we're going to come on to this again, is maybe a little bit lacking in plot, but there's plenty going on. This isn't a movie that I think you'll get bored with, because it really does chock it full with lots of kind of like horror elements. You're not going to be having to wait right to the end before your exorcism. You know, you'll get a variety through the movie, and it does have a little bit of a kind of sometimes a little bit of a sexy vibe as well. We get a few kind of like, you know, a bit of eye candy for the kind of the boys out there and things like that. Has a little bit of a kind of a sexy vibe to it as well. So it's kind of a fun film, and it certainly feels like it's a beginning of a series. Now, maybe what doesn't work for me is that it kind of feels like a pilot to a kind of a TV show. I don't know if that, I'm wondering if genuinely this was the case, because it honestly feels like some of the kind of the scenes, the dialogue scenes, it just feels like a soap opera. And then, without spoiling anything, the actual story, the way it kind of is told and is left, you feel like this is going to be some type of ongoing kind of saga, which it gives it a little bit of a kind of a TV movie vibe to it, albeit it's one with maybe a little bit more kind of like blood and monster effects than you've seen before, but nonetheless it's still there. I think maybe if I have to level some critiques at it, there's not a lot of plot, to be honest with you, and I think in a way I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of an advanced plot and maybe one less exorcism, because I don't think we needed to ever see as many that we do, in actual fact. I mean, they're fun, they're interesting to look at, and they kind of, we see different kind of types of demons and how people react to them, but I actually don't know if we needed to see quite as many, because I actually felt like it's a little bit of rinse and repeat. And I maybe would have liked to have seen a little bit more kind of story, a little bit more narrative. Certainly involved in, because things just happen to kind of fall in place. The nephew just happens to meet this girl that is able to kind of see demons whilst no one else does, and we kind of get a little bit of just a throwaway dialogue about the kind of the history, about how these people have kind of are able to kind of see these kind of creatures and things like that. So we don't really get that built up in the actual film. It's just kind of either in dialogue, we just got to accept it. And so the film just treats us to a variety of kind of different exorcisms. There was a movie called The Song of Solomon, which kind of did the same thing, just lots of exorcisms in a row. I mean, they're fun to watch, but narratively, I think it's a little bit on the weaker side. And I've got to say, Jeff Jarratt, his performance is a little wacky at times. You know, it borders on sometimes of the absurd. He's fun to watch, and I enjoy his character. And when he's actually a little more restrained, I felt his character seemed quite kind of likeable and believable. But there are times here, I don't know, he just seems a little bit too wacky to me. And the tone may put some people off, because it is it's a little bit weird, because you've got a genre of possession movies which it's not known for its comedy. Let's be honest. Mixed in with this kind of like light comedic vibe, which I feel is both, it's both negative and positive in a way, because it's negative in the fact that it feels jarring, because it feels so out of place, but at the same time it's refreshing because it feels quite new, and it's like you're experiencing a possession movie like you haven't watched before. And that respect, I do give it big props for, because this movie is entertaining. Maybe it's not the kind of the most deep story. Maybe it could have been a little bit more involved. I think maybe a little bit more work on the script I think would have helped. But it's certainly such an entertaining movie and so visually interesting, with some kind of like some, I've got to say, quite likeable characters you really root for and kind of quite enjoy watching. I have to be honest with you, I kind of quite enjoyed this one despite, I think, some faults. So I'm actually going to score this one a 7 out of 10. I actually had quite a good time with it, despite, I think, some nagging issues that I could have wished it had addressed. But I think most people will, if you can kind of keep an open mind and you're not expecting just a repeat of The Exorcist, you'll enjoy it. Because I think this movie is a lot of gooey fun. So 7 out of 10, have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.